The satirical puppet program Spitting Image recently featured Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. However, it was not the sketch itself, but the reported reaction from the Sussex camp that sparked a broader conversation. Accounts indicate Meghan reportedly sought an apology from the program, a response that illuminated the tension between their cultivated public image and private reactions. The new Spitting Image iteration delivered an unsparing satire, foregoing the light-hearted jesting celebrities might typically absorb. It directly addressed what it framed as sensitive points: ambition, attention-seeking, power dynamics, and the perceived contradiction between a narrative of freedom and a constant demand for the spotlight. This response, according to multiple reports, indicated a reaction that was not calm. This event warrants serious discussion, not because Spitting Image functions as a documentary, journalism, or analytical work. It is none of these. It is entertainment and should be primarily viewed as such. Yet, it occupies a unique space in public discourse, achieving something royal commentary and newspaper columns often cannot. It creates a shared cultural moment. Millions experience a joke simultaneously, arriving at a common punchline. While specific lines may fade, the underlying observation frequently endures. This is the mechanism of effective satire. It is not always the funniest element people recall, but rather the truest observation embedded within the humor. The show featured a mock commercial: "If I'm going to succeed in America, I need a lifestyle brand of creams and supplements. Gwyneth Paltrow has Goop, Kourtney Kardashian has Poosh, and Jamie Lee Curtis has Puger. Now I've got mine, Megoo," celebrating the sexy earth goddess in all of us. This broadcast prompts an examination of the sketch itself, its impact, what it reveals about shifts in public perception, and how a satirical puppet program might now wield more influence in shaping the wider narrative around Harry and Meghan than many other British media elements. We begin by examining the specific content of the Spitting Image portrayal, as the details offer more insight than a general assessment of its harshness. The puppet version of Meghan Markle was characterized by ruthlessness. She was depicted as control-obsessed, perpetually strategizing, positioning every public appearance and statement as a calculated move to advance the brand, rather than simply living her life. Her ambition for celebrity was exaggerated, as is typical of satire, but the exaggeration was precise. One scene showed her puppet disrupting a Michelle Obama book event, as if her status granted automatic access to any desired space. Harry's puppet, meanwhile, was depicted saying, more following Granny's rules: "Don't wear your pants on your head, Harry. Don't bathe on the butler, Harry. If I want to play polo in my living room, who's going to stop me?" Followed by, "Stop that right away, mate." This entitlement was played for comedic effect. However, the humor functions only if the audience already believes the underlying observation about Meghan's perceived public image has a basis in reality. This is how satire operates most effectively. It does not invent perceptions, but identifies existing ones within the culture. It then verifies through audience resonance that the perception is broadly shared enough to be humorous rather than puzzling, subsequently amplifying it to become visible and comic. The specific choice of the Michelle Obama setting is notable. Meghan and Michelle Obama have been frequently linked in public commentary for years, both described as trailblazers, connected to progressive American political culture, and associated with an aspirational public identity that generates genuine warmth. By staging a scene where Meghan's puppet treats access to that world as owed rather than earned, the sketch makes a pointed comment about the perceived disparity between the identity Meghan publicly presents and the identity a significant portion of the audience perceives her to inhabit. The portrayal of Harry's puppet was, in some respects, even more striking. Not necessarily harsher, but distinctive in its focus. Instead of the respected prince, war veteran, or mental health advocate, the Harry known for the first 3 decades of his life, the puppet was shown as a man seeking relevance in a changed world. All right, I finished my clippy. Where it says signature, do I put the royal seal? That's not necessary, Mr. of Wales. I see here that your previous career was in royalty, but it wasn't a career. My wife's got a Netflix empire. He was portrayed as awkward, uncertain, and reactive rather than decisive. In one scene, he pitches Meghan for a movie role, akin to a manager seeking work for a client whose star has dimmed. The sketch referenced a widely reported real moment. Harry reportedly spoke to a Disney executive about opportunities for Meghan at a red carpet film premiere, a moment filmed, circulated, and commented upon at the time. That fact had been largely logged and later forgotten. The sketch retrieved it, exaggerated it, and transformed it into a scene that elicited both laughter and discomfort. Harry's puppet featured one particularly resonant detail that distinguished this sketch from lighter royal satire. At one point, it complained about being fifth in line to the throne, as though this statistical birthright constituted a personal injustice. This could have been a fleeting gag, but the show went further. The puppet was depicted as being aware of its own nature, a puppet controlled, moving through scenes it had not authored. This detail elevated a simple observation into something with considerable weight, a comment not merely on Harry's present circumstances, but on how a significant portion of the audience has interpreted the last several years. It portrayed a man who once held a clearly defined role within a globally recognized institution, who stepped away from that role, and who has since constructed a replacement structure that many observers feel has never quite achieved the same coherence or solidity. The power dynamic within the sketch generated the most sustained discussion outside of specific scenes. Meghan's puppet commanded the narrative while Harry's puppet struggled to keep pace, reacting to situations rather than initiating them, following a script that appeared to have been written by someone else. "I'm producing for you" is going to be huge. Tell Eldon all about it. It's about a beautiful young swan, but no one treats her like the beautiful swan she is until season 2, when everyone apologizes to her. This observation, the perceived imbalance, the sense of one person leading and another being led, is not new in royal commentary. It is circulated for years, often in coded language, typically attributed to anonymous palace sources, and usually presented with enough diplomatic hedging to remain just short of a definable claim. Spitting Image presented it directly and unapologetically in a manner exclusive to satire. There was no qualification, no sourcing note, no according to a person close to the situation. Simply the puppet dynamic played out for 2 minutes, allowing the audience to draw conclusions they were already inclined to form. The most memorable and discussed specific scene involved Meghan's puppet calmly managing Harry like a professional project, rather than a partner, composed, focused, and completely in control while he fumbled through situations. This is broad satire, but it draws on a perception that has been building in commentary circles since at least the early Sussex years, and in some quarters considerably before. The sketch does not create this perception. It identifies it already present in the culture, refines it, and gives it a puppet face. Whether this perception is accurate is distinct from whether it holds cultural currency. Spitting Image is not a journalistic enterprise. It reflects, showing an audience a version of reality they already half believe, exaggerated enough for laughter, yet specific enough to provoke thought. Satire maintains a unique relationship with uncomfortable truths, setting it apart from other forms of public commentary. It cannot face legal action for expressing a viewpoint if that view is framed as exaggeration. It cannot be accused of cruelty because its format signals from the outset that the ordinary rules of discourse are suspended. It requires no sources, documents, or palace briefings. It simply presents observations in a format that elicits laughter, and that laughter embeds the observation somewhere it persists. A Spitting Image sketch goes viral because it is funny. However, once people have laughed, the underlying observation resonates in their thinking in a way a newspaper column does not always achieve. The laugh serves as the delivery mechanism. The observation is what remains. If this analysis provides insight into complex dynamics, please indicate your appreciation. This genuinely helps us reach a wider audience. Consider subscribing and sharing your perspective. Was the Spitting Image parody fair satire, or did it go too far? The reaction from the Sussex side, according to multiple reports, was not the measured non-response typically deployed by a confident public figure in such situations. The standard approach for someone with a strong public image, satirized by a comedy show, is straightforward: say nothing or acknowledge it lightly, signaling an ability to take a joke before quickly moving on. What was reported instead was considerably less composed. Multiple accounts stated that Meghan reportedly wanted an apology from the program. This detail, regardless of its complete factual accuracy, became a story in itself because requesting an apology from a satirical puppet program is not a move any seasoned communication strategist would recommend. It amplifies attention to the sketch. It signals that the content resonated deeply rather than harmlessly deflecting. It confirms for observers that the reaction was emotional, not strategic. This disparity between the polished, intentional, carefully managed image the Sussex brand projects in virtually all other contexts and the unguarded emotional response reportedly produced by a piece of puppet satire is arguably the most revealing aspect of the entire episode. Not the jokes, the puppets, or specific scenes, but the fact that this particular form of criticism appears to have penetrated defenses that tabloid front pages, royal biographies, and critical commentators have spent years attempting to breach. The sketch resonated because it identified the space between the public narrative and private sentiment, and the reaction reportedly confirmed that this space exists. Let us now consider the sketch's underlying message beyond the immediate humor. This is where the cultural analysis offers more insight than a simple comedy recap. Spitting Image is not random. Its writers research their targets. The specific observations they choose to lampoon are selected for their resonance with a sufficient portion of the audience, enabling the humor to land. Audience recognition transforms an observation into a joke. When the show decided to portray Meghan as endlessly strategic and Harry as having lost his footing, they were not inventing these perceptions. They were reflecting them. The core critique embedded in the sketch addresses a central contradiction within the Sussex public identity. The couple departed the royal family citing a desire for privacy, autonomy, and freedom from the monarchy's institutional pressures. This forms the foundation of the narrative they have presented across major interviews, documentaries, and publications since 2020. They frame their departure as a liberation from scrutiny, control, and a system they found unworkable. Simultaneously, by all observable measures, they have never been more publicly visible, commercially active, or dependent on public attention than in the years following that departure. Every project produced since 2020 has been built on the same foundation: their story in relation to the institution they left and what that institution reportedly did or did not do to them. Every interview has referenced the palace years. Every commercial deal has leveraged the royal connection to attract an audience. Harry's memoir sold because it detailed private family conversations facilitated by his royal background. The Netflix documentary generated interest by promising insider conflict rooted in the institutional life they exited. The subsequent brand trades on the aesthetic of royalty without the obligations of royal service. The sketch directly and specifically skewers this contradiction. The puppets discuss escaping the system, yet every punchline pulls them deeper into a version of the system they reconstructed around themselves. Instead of the monarchy, there are streaming deals. Instead of royal engagements, there are brand launches and media appearances. Instead of institutional protocol, there is media strategy and content operations. The structure differs, but the dependency on public attention, and specifically on the royal story, remains identical. This is the core argument Spitting Image presents, not through a newspaper column, a documented source, or a palace briefing, but through a puppet show watched by millions, whose observations linger in their thinking when a Sussex story next appears in their feed. The format bypasses conventional defenses against criticism because it does not assume the form of criticism. It takes the form of entertainment. It cannot be characterized as a tabloid attack, nor can it be subject to legal action. It simply evokes laughter, and that laughter accomplishes its purpose. The cultural timing of this sketch is also significant. It did not emerge in a vacuum. Spitting Image has returned at a moment when the mainstream British press is more openly and broadly critical of the Sussex operation than at any point since their initial departure. Developments such as the editorial split within the Daily Mail regarding Project Thaw versus the Boshoff assessment that nobody wants to see Meghan, the Invictus Financial Scrutiny Board departures, the anniversary post met with A-list celebrity silence, and the commentary regarding wishes being published as news have all accumulated over several months. The cumulative effect has been a noticeable shift in the tone of coverage, which even a year ago was more cautious and balanced. Spitting Image did not instigate this shift. Its return coincided with it. However, its arrival is itself an indicator because comedy shows of this nature tend to reflect the cultural temperature rather than dictate it. The 1980s Spitting Image was scathing about Thatcher and Reagan because they were the dominant political figures of their era, and the audience was receptive to their lampooning. The current version makes choices about what the audience in 2025 is prepared to find acceptable. The decision to focus on Harry and Meghan in this particular manner, with this specific level of aggression, conveys something important about what the production team believes the British audience is ready to find funny rather than uncomfortable. This sketch would likely not have been produced in 2019. the cultural temperature was genuinely different. The British public still held residual warmth for Harry, specifically stemming from his military service, mental health campaigns, and years as a working royal during which he appeared to perform his duties with sincerity. That warmth has, by every available polling measure and observable public signal, considerably diminished. Spitting Image produced this sketch now because this is when it resonates. The cultural permission to satirize Harry and Meghan in this specific way and at this level of aggression, without significant public backlash, is something the show's writers would have tested and confirmed before committing. The fact of their commitment, and at this level, provides cultural evidence of the current public sentiment. The sketch also captures a dimension of Harry's narrative that extends beyond the comparatively straightforward jokes about Meghan's ambition and control. This specific dimension warrants careful analysis, as it constitutes a less obvious and arguably more compelling aspect of the show's commentary. The portrayal of Harry as a man who once possessed a clearly defined identity. Captain General of the Royal Marines, patron of organizations with genuine institutional weight, embedded within a framework of purpose provided by the monarchy, and who now navigates a world where none of those structures apply, is among the show's more insightful observations. This is not merely a cruel portrait. It is, and the show deserves credit for this distinction, a somewhat melancholy one, even within its comedic framing. It depicts a puppet aware of its own puppetry, a man who distanced himself from the institution that defined his identity, only to find that the identity constructed in its place never quite achieves the same structural stability. This is not a character subjected to mockery without sympathy. This is a character the show appears to view with a complex recognition, acknowledging the genuine difficulty of the situation, yet still finding it humorous without pretending these two aspects are incompatible. This complexity differentiates sophisticated satire from simple mockery. Simple mockery asserts absurdity. Satire, at its sharpest, conveys humanity. This is where you have ended up, and the disparity between your intended path and your actual position is genuinely comic. The Spitting Image portrayal of Harry falls into this latter category, which, paradoxically, constitutes a form of dignity the show extends to him, even while making him the subject of the joke. Whether this interpretation reaches most viewers, or whether the inherent sympathy registers alongside the humor, will depend entirely on viewers' existing perspectives and their conclusions about the past 5 years. The Sussex narrative intersects with numerous pre-existing attitudes about class, celebrity, the monarchy, and public figures' obligations to their audience. Consequently, two individuals watching the same sketch can derive entirely opposite experiences. If one already believes Harry made a significant error in leaving and has since struggled to regain his footing, the sketch affirms that reading. If one believes he made the correct decision and has since been unfairly targeted, the sketch appears as another attack from a culture unwilling to grant him the distance he sought. This division ultimately explains why the Sussex story continues to generate such intense discussion 5 years after their departure. It has become a Rorschach test for attitudes that predate Harry and Meghan and will likely outlast them. Spitting Image did not create these divisions. It simply identified their precise intersection, placed two puppets there, and allowed the audience to supply the rest. The final observation merits specific emphasis. The sketch reportedly incensed Meghan, with multiple accounts stating she apparently desired an apology. This is significant not because it validates the portrayal, but because of what it suggests about the relationship between the Sussex public image and the particular form of criticism satire represents. For years, the standard response to critical coverage has been to contest it, counter it, seek legal redress, or characterize it as originating from a hostile and specifically motivated British press. This framework has functioned to some degree within the American media environment, where the reputation of the British tabloids provides a ready narrative. However, it proves considerably less effective when the critique emanates from a comedy program, from a panel of commentators who have often been broadly sympathetic, or from editorial voices within newspapers previously engaged in Project Thaw. Satire occupies a distinct position within this landscape. It cannot be accused of a tabloid vendetta. It cannot be characterized as a palace briefing disguised as journalism. By its nature, it is a cultural reflection rather than an editorial stance, rendering it considerably harder to contest without appearing to validate its message. The puppet articulation mirrored what a significant portion of the audience has been contemplating. The reaction, if reports are accurate, confirmed that the subjects of the satire understood precisely where the observation had landed. This confirmation, unguarded, apparently genuine, and seemingly unplanned strategically, is perhaps the most revealing aspect of the entire episode, surpassing the sketch itself. The response to the sketch is the most culturally revealing element produced by the whole event. Do you believe Spitting Image made a fair and generally accurate satirical point about the Sussex brand and its central contradiction? Or did it exceed the bounds of appropriate satire? Please share your perspective. Subscribe for further analysis. The framework that positioned all criticism as a motivated institutional attack was constructed to manage a specific type of opponent. Spitting Image does not fit that profile. It cannot be labeled a tabloid vendetta because it is not a tabloid. It cannot be accused of being a palace briefing. A puppet cannot be characterized as racially motivated. The usual defenses do not apply to this particular form of criticism. By reportedly reaching for these defenses anyway, by apparently seeking an apology from a comedy program, the response may have affirmed precisely what the sketch suggested, that the gap between their public confidence and private reaction is wider than their communication strategy is designed to conceal. The puppets identified that gap. The reaction reportedly confirmed its existence. This combination, the observation, the humor, and the unguarded confirmation from the subjects themselves, elevates this sketch to a genuinely meaningful cultural moment within the broader Sussex narrative, ensuring its remembrance long after specific jokes fade from memory. One final point warrants clarification before concluding this discussion. The fact that a puppet show has generated such extensive serious analysis is itself part of the story. Spitting Image is comedy. Its primary purpose is entertainment. Individual sketches should be evaluated first as entertainment and second as cultural analysis. However, cultural commentary that resonates widely enough to generate its own news cycle, its own wave of public discussion, and its own apparently significant reaction from the targets, has transitioned from mere entertainment into something that occupies both categories simultaneously. It is comedy that the wider audience discusses, as if it were journalism, and that the subjects appear to have treated as requiring a formal institutional response. This precisely renders this particular moment culturally unusual. That combination, the comic form, the cultural weight, the broad public reach, and the apparently unusually unguarded reaction from the subjects, is what makes it worth understanding as more than just humorous television. It is humorous television that reveals something substantive about the current state of cultural discourse. Do you believe Spitting Image made a fair satirical point about the Sussex brand and its central contradiction? Or did it go too far? Share your views below. Subscribe to ensure you do not miss subsequent content. Your engagement genuinely helps us reach more individuals seeking this type of analysis.